Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled you're here today because we're about to unravel a completely mind-boggling geographical and environmental mystery. We're looking at a place that just outright defies logic. It's a spot where this absolutely pristine, gorgeous nature has been totally suffocated by a dark, dystopian reality. We're digging into a wild paradox today that really forces us to question what progress even means. So grab a seat, get ready, because what we're about to uncover is going to completely change how you look at environmental data and the hidden costs of industry. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to take just a quick second and mentally guess which city was crowned India's absolute most polluted in 2024. Just picture it in your head. When we hear the words toxic air in India, our minds kind of automatically jump to the massive, super congested urban centers, right? You're probably thinking of the northern plains, those massive industrial hubs, the places that literally make global headlines every single winter for their thick smog. Well, as we cross out the usual suspects, a really shocking truth emerges. It wasn't Delhi, nope, not Noida or Ghaziabad or Faridabad or Loni. The absolute most polluted city in India in 2024 was a tiny town with less than 100,000 people called Barnihat, out in the state of Meghalaya. And listen, if you know anything at all about Indian geography, that revelation should absolutely floor you. You see, Meghalaya literally translates to the land of clouds. It's famously pitched on tourist postcards as this clean, lush, green paradise, just packed with pristine mountains and breathtaking waterfalls. But look at this terrifying cognitive dissonance. Right in the middle of this pristine state, there is a place where a thick, suffocating layer of black soot has just settled over nature itself. The green leaves are completely coated in this black grime. It is literally a dystopian nightmare hiding in plain sight within one of India's cleanest regions. Let's actually quantify this nightmare for a second. 128. That was Barnihat's average PM 2.5 level. These are those microscopic, highly toxic particles floating around the air that get buried deep inside human lungs. And keep in mind, this number isn't just a random bad day or a temporary spike. This is the staggering, suffocating average density of pollution that the folks in this town are forced to breathe in every single day. And this brilliantly illustrates just how mathematically terrifying that reality actually is. The World Health Organization's recommended safe limit for PM 2.5 is exactly 5. Just 5. And Barnihat is sitting at 128. The air in this tiny, formerly idyllic town is literally dozens of times more toxic than the safe global standard. We're talking about a level of pollution that doesn't just make the sky look a little cloudy, it fundamentally alters life itself. Section 1. Life under the soot, a society covered in grime. Let's take all this macro-level pollution data and ground it in the daily, micro-level lives of the locals. Like, what does it actually look and feel like to live your life under a constant, endless rain of industrial soot? So, Meghalaya is a totally unique tribal state, home primarily to the Garo and Khasi communities. These are incredibly fascinating, traditionally matriarchal societies, meaning lineage runs through the women, and husbands often move into the wives' homes. Historically, they've always lived in perfect harmony with their beautiful natural surroundings. But today, the pollution is so intensely pervasive that villagers actually have to scrub the vegetables they grow in their very own gardens 3 to 4 times just to wash off the thick, black, industrial grime. Even then, they have to physically wipe them down with a cloth before eating. Their most basic food sources are being completely tainted. But it's not even just the visual grime. It's a full-on sensory assault. Imagine standing right in the middle of a lush mountain forest, where you should be hearing the serene chirping of birds and rustling leaves. Instead, the locals are subjected to this constant 24/7 buzzing noise. They describe it as sounding exactly like a low-flying airplane continuously roaring overhead, never landing, never leaving. This maddening noise pollution from the surrounding factories just haunts their homes. It gives them absolutely zero respite, day or night. Section 2. The human toll, from coughs to cancer. Let's pivot for a second from the environmental degradation to look at the very real, severe bodily harm that's being inflicted on this small, totally trapped population. I want to read you this quote from a local villager. "One way or another, we will have to eat. We are forced to live. Our birthplace is right here. It is just a heartbreaking reality. These tribal villagers can't just pack up their bags and move to a fancy new city. This is their ancestral land. They are completely physically trapped in this toxic environment, forced to endure the brutal physical consequences simply because they have nowhere else to go."
So the crucial point is that this isn't just anecdotal. While the villagers share these deeply tragic stories, like a husband developing a massive throat tumor and passing away from cancer, the cold, hard government data completely validates their nightmare. Just notice the stark jump from 2022 to 2024. Respiratory illness cases in Bernie Hut spiked from roughly 2,000 to nearly 3,700 cases. That is a massive 77% increase in breathing-related medical cases in a remarkably short amount of time.
Because of all this, the entire psychology of the town has completely shifted. Diseases that are literally life-threatening are now discussed with this alarming casualness. Villagers talk about asthma, severe skin diseases, and cancer as if they're just a normal, everyday part of life. And you have to keep in mind, this was a perfectly healthy, clear-aired village just 7 or 8 years ago, right before this massive industrial boom happened. Section 3. The cross-border loophole, trapped in the bolt. Let's transition to the incredibly frustrating geographical and political loophole that allows this tragedy to continue completely unchecked. First up, we have what we call the topographical trap. So Bernie Hut sits in a valley that's kind of shaped like a bowl. And inside this little bowl, there are roughly 80 heavily polluting factories packed incredibly tightly together. Because of this geography, all that massive amount of toxic smoke and emissions generated by these factories physically cannot escape. The pollution just gets trapped, hovering directly over the heads of the villagers like a lid. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast revealing a total jurisdictional nightmare. Technically speaking, Bernie Hut is located within the borders of the state of Meghalaya, but geographically, it sits just 20 kilometers right on the outskirts of Guwahati, which is a major city in the neighboring state of Assam. So what happens? Bernie Hut essentially serves as the industrial dumping ground for Guwahati. Assam gets the economic benefit of the factories, and Meghalaya gets the devastating pollution. And from a bureaucratic standpoint, it is a complete mess. The chief ministers of both states have written formal letters to each other. They've formed joint committees. There have even been some localized fines and temporary factory shutdowns that, made the local news. But as the sources impartially note, there is still currently zero long-term actionable plan to actually save these people. The toxic smoke effortlessly drifts across state borders, but political accountability absolutely does not. Section 4. The green energy irony, the ultimate betrayal. Okay, prepare yourselves, because we are arriving at the absolute emotional climax and the most shocking twist of this whole explainer. With 80 heavily polluting factories generating the absolute worst air quality in the entire country, you really have to ask yourself, what exactly are they manufacturing down there? What requires so much toxic emission? I mean, you're probably sitting there assuming it's heavy traditional industry, right? Like coal processing, oil refinement, maybe cement or heavy metals. The answer is ethanol. The very factories that are choking this village, sending respiratory illnesses absolutely skyrocketing and coating the forest in black soot, are producing ethanol. The sources highlight this incredibly stark, dark paradox. The national eco-friendly promise, right, is to blend 20% ethanol into petrol to transition toward green energy. But notice the toxic reality. That quote-unquote clean alternative fuel is being manufactured in a way that generates severe, localized pollution. The sources point out that this big green energy transition is literally being built at a terrifyingly high cost to the lungs and health of these tribal villagers. And it's not just the air, either. Locals allege some extremely shady, highly unregulated practices by these ethanol and liquor factories. As one villager noted, they quietly install a pipeline in the river and release dirty water beneath. They release more smoke during the night no one watches. The river water where the fish are dying, where the locals are bathing, is allegedly being tainted with toxic waste, completely bypassing regulations under the cover of darkness. Section 5. Redefining progress. At what cost? Let's move to and see how this builds toward our overarching theme. We've looked at the data, the health toll, the geography, and this massive underlying paradox of how this is all happening. Now we have to explore the big questions raised by the sources. Look, factories are necessary. States like Assam and Meghalaya absolutely need economic development. However, reports question if true development in this scenario is missing one absolutely critical word: sustainable. Analysts and sources argue that building up a state's GDP should never, ever come at the cost of human health. Progress that turns a blind eye to the safety of its citizens is a progress that requires some serious, critical reevaluation. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What does progress actually mean? Is it really just numbers on a report showing we've blended more ethanol into our petrol? Because right now, today, in a once pristine tribal village in Meghalaya, little children come home from school and go outside to play in a thick blanket of toxic industrial soot. The true cost of our green progress is being paid by them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I will see you next time.